Thank you to Surf Prep and our patrons for sponsoring this episode. As always, I'll give a shout out to our top tier patrons at the end of the episode. If you want to be part of the Maker Lounge podcast community, head over to patreon.com/Maker Lounge podcast. You can watch these episodes on YouTube on Thursdays, or you can sign up to be a Patreon member and it drops on Wednesdays. Welcome to the lounge. I'm Matt with Voltner Woodworking and your host of the Maker Lounge podcast, where every Friday we have a rotating group of makers hanging out and talking shop with each other. He's the guy that likes to challenge the status quo with his intriguing titles and thumbnails, flex his sharp chisels, and loves the color purple. Not the movie. You may have heard him talk about his custom Cocobolo handled tools in last year's Holiday Hangout episode and his unique ability to do weird flexes. But this episode, we'll try to see how many times I can get him to say the word YouTube. Suman Sarkar with Woodcraft by Suman is in the lounge.
Thank you so much for having me. Now I'm going to have to be very conscientious of how many times I say the word, that word.
What? I'm sorry, which word?
YT.
I'll be ready for you.
Oh, man.
What's the word for YouTube in Bengali?
It's probably the same.
YouTube.
I wouldn't know. Yeah.
But with an accent or something, right?
YouTube.
So,
yeah.
Before we get to the episode today, I want to thank our sponsor, Surf Prep Sanding. Whether you're looking for the highest quality of sanders, dust extractors, or abrasives, Surf Prep has what you need to take your project to the next level. I've been using Surf Prep for a couple of years now and know firsthand the quality of their products. The amazing family who stands behind their brand is by far the best in the industry. Use code MAKERLOUNGE, all one word, for 10% off your order at surfprepsanding.com. English is
something like that.
So English is not your first language.
It is not. No.
Is that right? Yeah. So is it Bengali? It's Bengali.
It is
right?
Bengali. Mm-hmm.
See, I do my homework.
I don't know where you got that information from. It wouldn't be easily available. So you do creepy homework.
Right. Well, I do know that you studied molecular genetics and biochemistry.
Shit, you did look at my resume.
We won't get into that boring stuff. But Woodcraft by Suman. That's the channel name on YouTube and Instagram. And so before you started that, you are working. This isn't your full-time thing.
Correct. This is very much a part-time passion.
Yeah. And the goal is to just continue sourcing this hobby with the full-time job, right?
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of folks in the creative space have aspirations to, use their creative outlet as a way to go into it full-time and escape their day job. But I really don't have any desire to escape my day job. I like it quite a bit. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who do this, I think, just starting off, and then they kind of get into it. And then they're like, oh, man, it's nice not having to, deal with bosses and stuff like that. But then they find out that, YouTube becomes their boss, or
you become your own boss, and
yeah.
They don't have any, structure, guidance, or professionalism to themselves. So yeah, it can be a lot emotionally. So,
and then having clients and doing commission work, you've got people saying, oh, this broke, this wood split, or something like that. Come back and fix it. It's just
right.
So it's nice to have that.
I feel like being a content producer, creator is one thing. Being an actual maker and a person who produces goods to sell, like woodworking products, that's a whole nother ballgame, man. I mean, you need to have so many different skill sets and so much probably more tool to increase efficiency and all of that, For people like us, we care more about increasing efficiency and how we record things, our workflow and file storage and stuff like that. Those are the challenges of a content creator. And so in that regard, it's pretty nice challenges relative to now you have to spend the time away to fix that project that didn't go right.
Right. Yeah, we spend our weekends half the time working on file management and getting B-roll shots put into the right folders. And
yeah, they're truly the first world problems of problems.
Yeah. So you have a new baby girl. How old is she now?
She is going to be 15 months soon.
Oh my goodness.
I
Seems
know.
like she was just born. Yeah. It's crazy.
I know. Time
Now
flies.
my daughter's
Yeah.
and she's 12.
Wow.
It's going fast. Mm-hmm. So she's your little shop helper.
Yeah, she actually does all of the work. I mean, she's the person behind the camera the whole time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be woodcraft by her before long.
I think she has aspirations of taking over my channel someday.
I can see it. She's definitely better looking than you are. So
Oh man, I might have to ask my wife if I had any role in her looks.
yeah, I just realized as I was saying that, it's like sounds really creepy, like creepy old man.
No, not at all. I mean, we're friends, right? So in that capacity, it's not creepy
Yeah.
at all. Now, if I was on this podcast
Yeah.
and you were somebody I didn't know and you said that for the first time, like, okay, let's see, let's backtrack. This guy went and reviewed my resume, and now he's telling me my
Right.
15-month-old daughter is cute. Okay, yeah, let's continue being on that podcast.
Yeah, and your address is I didn't go that far. I mean, you're not that easy to research. Yeah, I do like to do the research, but you and I, like you said, we're friends. We talk outside of this, and but you do have the most basic link tree ever that I've seen.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
like, here's my two things that, and so very focused, not like mine where there's like, go check out this latest thing or that latest
Yeah.
shiny toy.
Yeah,
So
I mean, part of that is sheer laziness. And part of it is there's really only two things that I care about, right? And the biggest
Yeah.
of it is directing the folks from Instagram to YouTube if they are interested in that. So I wanted them to have a quick and easy way to get to that, space. But beyond that, a lot of times I get questions about the products that I use in my shop. And so I have an Amazon storefront where all of the products that I actually use in my shop, not all of them, but a good amount of them that is available
Yeah.
through Amazon are there so that you can browse and see if it's something of interest. I know a lot of folks like to recommend products, but for me, the
Right.
products I recommend are products that I generally use. So it's a good place to just kind of house all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that when I pass on an affiliate link or something like that through Instagram, those don't usually work too well, but Amazon always seems to work. And I don't understand why that is, why there's such a barrier for somebody clicking on a link in Instagram to take them to a third-party website. And maybe just something, because if they don't have an account set up with that third party, then there's that whole setup thing.
Oh no,
I don't-
it's
yeah.
a lot more simple than that. Instagram doesn't want you to leave their platform.
Right.
It's that
Right.
simple.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Which is why the YouTube thing never really pans out, and people stopped, I think, putting links to their YouTube like videos that we used to all do it. I think, post a story with a link to your YouTube, and then you
Yeah.
get 30 seconds of watch time.
There used to be like a swipe up feature on Instagram where you could just swipe up and it'll take you to the link. That disappeared as well. But I think, in terms of directing folks from Instagram space to YouTube, it's something that I avoid doing because, like you mentioned, the folks on Instagram are a completely different audience, generally speaking, than the folks on YouTube. And their attention spans and what they're looking to get from that content creator specifically is different too. So me posting a link to a long format video in a short format platform just doesn't make sense.
Right.
But if somebody clicks on my link tree and then goes to my YouTube because they want to know more, that is probably the kind of audience member that I do want on YouTube. And so in that case, it's available to them to jump on. It's the same reason why I would never post my YouTube videos when I publish it. I let it ride on YouTube and let YouTube
Right.
do its thing.
Right. Yeah. I remember when you did your last video, you didn't even tell me you published it. And I think we had talked like the day before.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and I think I saw it like day 2 or 3. I was like, oh, he put out his video. So
That's because you
But-
probably wouldn't watch it the whole way. That's why I didn't share the link with you.
no, I'm actually one of the few people who will, unless the video really sucks. So, well, yeah, never mind. You're right. No, but unless the video really sucks, I watch the video all the way through.
That's
sometimes I make a
dedication.
comment about like the last few lines of a video. I guess it's just a matter of I like to see the whole process. If it's captivated me enough to stay halfway through, then I feel like and part of that is because I know how the algorithm works in that regard. That's the only thing that I understand about the algorithm. You know that because we've talked at
Yeah,
length.
I think it's very nice of you to do that. And there is another element to it, I would say, and that is if you're watching the content of a creator, you're not watching the content necessarily for enjoyment, though that may be a part of it. There's a good chance you're trying to study that content, right? At least implicitly in the back of your mind. As a content creator, you just do that, right?
Right.
So there's reason to watch that through and try to make sense of what may have worked and what may not have worked. So certainly, there are some contents that I will watch for that purpose, even
Right.
though the nature of the video is not necessarily something that's targeted towards me as an audience.
Right. Yeah, I think there are a few creators who I watch just for the entertainment purposes, like Peter McKinnon. I watch for the entertainment purpose, because I'm not super into cameras or, whatever, but his way of delivery and stuff just is captivating. And so he's one that I just watch for entertainment purpose. But most of the people that I follow, I watch because, yeah, I'm studying what they have to do or maybe there's an idea for a future video or something.
No, exactly right. And somebody like Peter McKinnon is an easy person to watch because he's a beautiful man, but also because he's just a very charismatic guy that can capture you in with his storytelling. And that is
Right.
a skill set that not a lot of creators have, but a lot of the very, very successful creators do have that skill set of just storytelling and captivating an audience.
Yeah.
There's a book that I should read. A friend of mine recommended.
Are you going to recommend a book you haven't read?
So it's called Hook Point. I was told to buy that book.
I've started it.
Yeah, I've bought it.
I've
I
started
read
it.
maybe the first 2 paragraphs. I took it with me to WorkbenchCon, and I thought I'm going to read this on the plane ride. It didn't
Yeah.
happen, but I should probably read that because I think that book covers that a little bit.
Did Drew Witt tell you about it?
Yeah, it was true.
Yeah. I think he tells everybody to watch that or to read that book. I don't sit and read. There are a few books that I will do if they have a lot of visual stuff in it, but that's one I have on Audible.
Nice.
I started it, but I haven't finished it. But it's good. Yeah.
So the book didn't hook you in, huh?
Well, I started it, but then I started another one. Just like woodworking projects
Yeah.
or YouTube videos.
Oh, I wouldn't know that. I start one and finish it and then go to the next one.
Right. We'll get to that. Just you wait. We're going to hear more about this clamp video here in a few minutes.
5 years in the making.
Yeah. There'll be a whole new set of clamps by the time you get this video out.
Yep. Bessie will release a new type.
Yeah. So, the anti-parallel clamp. So how did you get into all of this? How'd you get into the woodworking stuff?
So it's kind of, I think a lot of folks come into woodworking because they may have purchased a home that needs renovation or needs small things to be done. And when you try to coordinate with a contractor, you realize how much of a pain it is to do that. Currently, I'm trying to coordinate with 2 different electricians to get some wiring done. And my God, is it hard to get these people to commit to like doing what they said they would do. And so
Right.
in that regard, and perhaps financial element of it too, folks come in and it's like, okay, I'm going to buy a miter saw, buy a table saw and fix this part of the house. For me, it was well before I owned a house. My then girlfriend, and we were just kind of walking down and seeing I think it was a farmer's market or craft fair of some kind. And there was this guy selling a bunch of cutting boards and they all look really nice, but relatively basic because I think he understands his market where he's not going to go fancy with crazy design or, of an end grain cutting board or anything like that. They're relatively basic, but still much prettier than the ones that you could find in stores. And so I think he was charging like $120 for an edge grain cutting board. And like, don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with that. To me, I thought at the time, like, that's way too much.
Yeah.
I can make that. And so, a couple of $100 more in tools later, I made my first cutting board, and the utility.
I'm laughing because I can relate.
The utility of being able to make something with your hands, and I used to do photography a lot more seriously at the time. So having something that's physically tangible and being able to interact with it and work with your hands, that is an addicting feeling. And so, I continued to make more and more things, and then eventually got to this point. But yeah, it started with a cutting board.
Yeah. I went back and looked at least the photos that you still have posted publicly, and saw that, you had started with some end grain cutting boards. And then, so a lot of early posts was that some gardening, not gardening, but you were doing some like herbs or something like that. I think, back when the channel started.
But doing herbs?
What was it like?
That sounds way more suspicious than it really is.
Stay tuned for the after show, people.
I'm pretty sure.
If you want to be part of the after show, patreon.com/Baker Lounge podcast. Shameless plug.
They were basil, probably.
Yeah. Well, it was some greenery. I wasn't too interested in that, so I didn't read any of the captions. But you were doing some herbal science.
Yeah. I do enjoy gardening quite a bit. I've gotten more and more into it lately than I have in the past. Little known fact is I grew up in a farm. So when I was born in Bangladesh, and we talked about this earlier, and I grew up in rural parts of the country where, farming is just a daily part of life, and that's kind of what you do. And so, I didn't personally get that involved in the process because I was a child, but so there was always a part of me that always enjoyed the idea of growing your own food. And so coming to the US, the climate is so different, the soil is so different, and I didn't really know what to make of any of that. But now I've gotten kind of into it. I have a little bit of a indoor growing area where I can grow herbs like basil. But it's actually the climate in the north part of the country. It just got up to a point where I think I can comfortably plant things now. So tomorrow it actually is gardening day for me to put some plants down.
Nice. So you started doing the cutting boards, but then actually one of your earlier photos was a table that you did with some bow ties or inlays or something like that.
Yeah.
So you kind of like went full steam into woodworking. You weren't building pallet furniture and things like that. I mean, it's a beautiful table that you made.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. That was I think one of our first or maybe second dining table. That one, man, I remember. This is how things have changed. That slab, it's a single piece of slab for a reasonably medium to medium large size dining table. I remember buying that slab for $300.
Wow.
And you can't buy that for 3 times as much anymore.
Yeah, you can't buy half of that. I mean, it's crazy. You could maybe make a bench out of that.
Yeah. But it was from a place where they didn't do kiln drying, and I don't know, for one reason or another, and of course is the case with large slabs, you get cracks everywhere. So I had seen other folks do bow tie, and this was like a very new thing to me. And the concept of, basically routing and chiseling a bow tie was like very, very foreign. But I thought, okay, the best way to learn is to just do it. And by that, I mean, forget the practice. Just go into it, because there's high stakes involved in screwing up a slab like that costs $300, right? And surprisingly, it worked out just fine. I mean, I think woodworking is one of those things where nowadays we watch so many people teach us those things on YouTube space that you learn quite a bit if you're just observant enough. You learn quite a bit. You learn quite a bit on the platform. And so when it is time for you to go and do that thing, I think people are fairly confident, as I was in the case, and it worked out pretty well. And I've been doing bow ties quite a bit since then.
Yeah. So have you actually made a bow tie, a wooden bow tie that you could wear?
No, it's funny. I really wanted to make one and have it as a bow tie for my wedding or something like that.
Oh yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it didn't get vetoed per se by my wife, but I knew enough to know to not do that.
Yeah. Don't even go there.
With that being said, the tie clip did
Oh, yeah.
have a little Cocobolo strip on top. So that was
See?
the only little thing that I got to do. And I think her shoes, if I remember correctly, did have instead of having a bow, on the front of it, it was a Cocobolo bow tie.
Nice.
Yeah.
See? Nailed the intro with the Cocobolo. I knew we'd come full circle with that one.
Yeah.
So who was your inspiration back then when you were like just getting into woodworking?
I think so. I know a lot of folks started out with Steve Ramsey, and I certainly watched him quite a bit. But his style of woodworking was predominantly with, dimensional lumber that's available at the home center. Your typical pine, spruce, and all that stuff, and maybe some of the, like red oak or white oak or something like that. But generally speaking, he focused very much towards the construction people that may want to dabble into woodworking, or people who can just go buy the wood from the home center. For me, that was never of interest. I mean, if I wanted something to be, if I want to spend that much time in making something, I always wanted it to be something of nice quality, made out of the proper hardwoods and all of that stuff. Not that either is proper or not proper, but with that being said, Mark Spagnolo from The Wood Whisperer was definitely a pretty big inspiration at the time. And I think Mac Cremona as well. Rob Cosman obviously did some sharpening and got that ingrained in my brain. So those three folks, I think, played the largest role at the time.
Rob was your gateway.
Rob was the gateway drug, yeah.
Yeah, lots of great inspiration. I think back then when there was, the market wasn't so flooded with, I mean, we're talking like, what, 9 years ago, I think?
Something like that, yeah.
When you started doing this? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it was just starting to kind of get traction, I think, in the what we call now the maker space.
Right.
But now when you scroll through Instagram, it's like just one big giant advertisement with all the sponsored posts, basically. So yeah. But
I have some thoughts on that we can take into the after show.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. I always like talking about that kind of stuff. You probably had no dream that you would be having a YouTube channel or like really posting on Instagram, or that it was going to be, was it Woodcraft by Suman at that time, or was it just your name when you were posting those projects?
Oh, on Instagram, they were just under my name. It was my personal account. Yeah. And I think you mentioned something along the lines of the ones that's publicly available. And that's a good point. I think once my channel started to kind of take off and I really kind of geared it towards woodworking, the Instagram channel, I did remove a lot of the personal elements like family pictures, family events, and all of those, because eventually I realized, like, one, I don't want that information public. And two, I just didn't think it was appropriate to keep on that platform. So it was a personal account initially, and then it got converted.
Yeah, I had started posting on my personal account, and then it wasn't until I was doing a commission job, I was doing a built-in thing, and I was posting that, and then people started asking me, reaching out to me about the woodworking stuff, and I was like, I think I need to start another deal. So then it kind of morphed, and so I went that route. But I know a lot of people, they'll start with that personal account, and then it morphs into this business account, and it's hard to separate those lines.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I don't have a personal Instagram account anymore. So folks that are in my personal life do reach out to me there, and it's kind of interesting to, I don't know how to delineate the two. It just is what it is at this point. Yeah.
Well, and I think, everybody that follows my personal account, most of those people are following the woodworking one now, because I was posting more regularly on that one.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's just, that becomes who you are. People look at you and they're like, oh, there's Suman. He's a woodworker, and so when you, identify with people out on the street, do you identify as a woodworker, or do you identify as your profession?
I generally don't identify myself at all. I just like my name is Suman, and and that's it. Like I don't really unless somebody explicitly asks what I do for a living.
I'm not getting into pronouns. I'm just asking.
No, no, but I mean, unless somebody specifically asks me what I do, I don't talk about it at all because the line is a little bit blurry in my mind in some regards because it is hard to figure out because the amount of time I spend in content is insane. Mm-hmm. And so it definitely takes up a lot of headspace and it definitely takes up a lot of physical time. And so when you compare that to my day job, they're comparable in how much time they take. So it's like, which one am I really? But I guess it also depends on the audience, If I'm, among a creative group, then I would probably lean more towards the creative side. But if more often than not, I'm around scientific folks. And so I tend to lean towards my scientific background.
Yeah, it's funny talking to other people on the podcast, and they're full-time YouTube content creator, types and stuff like that, and they have I've kind of asked them that same question, and some of them are like, "Oh yeah, I tell people that I'm a YouTube woodworker or whatever," and people just stare at them like, "What is that?"
Oh yeah, I bet. What's interesting though is. A lot of times I think my wife introduces me to other people as a YouTube woodworker, Instagram woodworker of some kind. And at first I don't know how to respond to that because all of this time that I've spent being and developing myself into a professional is not that. So it just depends. We were at a wedding in Baltimore last weekend, and the table we were sitting in had, folks from various different backgrounds. And for some reason, the tone of it, one of them was working for a federal agency in government because it's pretty close to DC. And he wouldn't disclose what he does for, specifically what he does. And I'm like, we're going to play that game. So literally everybody around the table played the mystery of, I'm just going to change what my career is as a joke. Turns out there was one federal agent and everybody else were doctors. And I thought they were completely different jobs that they had. One of them was a mathematician. I told them I was a paper salesman. I don't even remember. It was hilarious.
You work at Dunder Mifflin?
Exactly.
Yeah. What sucks is when you get into one of those conversations and then they start asking you in-depth questions on that type of thing. You're like, crap.
The guy in that government agency, he was convinced I was legitimately a paper salesman. And so he was asking me questions, more in that line. And I'm like, I thought we were all joking. And eventually he's like, oh, so what do you really do? Oh, I'm a paper salesman. And he just lost it.
Yeah. And then the federal agent's like, I'm a YouTube woodworker. Right. You're like, I'm going to call on that one.
Yep. Haven't seen you around, buddy.
That's good. Yeah. You're like, I know that space. So speaking of woodworking and kind of diving a little bit more deep into that, what was your first, so you mentioned you got a miter saw, those types of things. What were some of the things that you, did you get the tools for the specific task at the time? Or did you kind of say, okay, these are all the kind of things that I need?
So I have always had some level of gear acquisition syndrome. And that tends to apply a lot more into the photography realm than, at least as the terminology applies more in the photography than it does in woodworking. So when I started out, that cutting board scenario that I mentioned, I think I just bought a table saw, this was a DeWalt portable table saw. I bought a DeWalt router, the 611, the DW611, the little palm router. Okay. And I bought a sander. I didn't even buy the random orbit sander. I bought the mouse sander, which was one heck of a regret. I don't even know why I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
And so that's how I started. And then eventually just kind of, bought more and more tools because I have, a problem, clearly.
Well, I've got a neighbor that she was like, "Oh yeah, I want to sand this project down." And I'm like, "Okay, what kind of sander do you have?" And she's like, "A belt sander." I like, "Oh, that's the only." Yeah, probably don't want to start with belt sander to like refinish a table.
Yeah, I mean, you could if you want that rustic look.
Yeah, it's good for pallet furniture, but
Yep. It produces
So-
saw marks, the fake saw marks, just with sandpaper.
yeah. Well, people can see at your background if they're watching on YouTube or on Spotify the video. They can see your background. You got a lot of nice tools that you've acquired over the years. Somewhat of a chisel fascination,
Lately,
Or,
a little bit of a chisel fascination.
chisel or hand plane fascination.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am the kind of person who has a romantic view of hand tools in some regard, but also a pragmatic approach because, I mean, I don't shy away from using power tools when it's necessary. And hand tools can get you into places and precision that you actually can't get with power tools in most scenarios. So I like to use them both, but the amount of hand tools that I've started to kind of collect at this point is very much unnecessary. I mean,
Yeah, I mean you're giving them away at this point.
yeah. It was just like I legitimately was like, okay, can I use this as a paint can like opener instead? Like,
Cardinal sin.
right. I legitimately thought about doing a reel on all the things you shouldn't do with the chisel and just sacrifice those chisels for that purpose. But then I thought, that's such a waste. I mean, somebody else could actually use that. And so I
They
gave
would
it
have
away.
gone viral.
Yeah, I'm trying to be, what's the word? Conscientious of what type of content I produce nowadays. I think to some extent,
Yeah.
because at least getting views and and all of that on Instagram is not a priority for me, and so I'm not interested in going viral from misusing tools like that. I'm not saying I'm not going to do it. Let's be honest. There are times I'll just do it for the fun of it. But I'm not doing it with an intent to get views, maybe just for fun.
Yeah, you have a good following on Instagram. Last I looked, what was it, 105, 107, something like that, I think,
It's
range?
somewhere in there.
1,000, by the way.
Oh, really?
No, 107,000 is, I'm telling the audience. And it's like, oh, wow, this guy only has 100 followers. You're like, yeah, but.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you know how cool it would be if you were to, go anywhere and there's like 100 people to listen to anything you say?
Yeah.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I'll take 107 followers any day.
Well, there's a lot less pressure, and you can kind of just do what you want at that point.
And not when there's 214 eyeballs looking at you in real life. That's a lot of pressure.
Well, yeah, actually, you did do that. How many people were in your class at WorkbenchCon?
I have no idea. I didn't look. I was just like, so most people may not realize this. Contrary to my social media presence, I don't generally enjoy public speaking. It's not a forte of mine. It's not something that I practice or anything, and it's not something that I enjoy. Like in my line of work, I do have to do presentations and all of that, but they're all very scientific things, so it's very factual, very specific, very regimented, and so that's easy. But in a creative sense, selling a idea, selling a product, or selling a process, you have to be a lot more charismatic and convincing and really kind of be a storyteller and a talker, right? That's not my thing. And so doing the whole talk at WorkbenchCon was very much my way of pushing myself to go out of the comfort zone and do something that I'm not really into.
Yeah. Would you do it again?
Probably. Again, because I like to be uncomfortable. I think the most growth that we have and we can get is by being in uncomfortable places that we're afraid of, because we're afraid of things we don't understand, and by doing it, you understand, right? And so if you can be comfortable with being uncomfortable, you're more likely to grow. And so in that regard, yeah, probably. There is another individual, another creator on Instagram and YouTube
I won't do it every time. I'll do that in post-processing, post-edit.
And so him and I are trying to come up with a strategy and what kind of value can we provide a second go around, and what would that look like? And, are there ways that we can combine our individual strengths and something that we can talk about that's actually valuable? Because I don't want to go there, give a talk for the sake of giving a talk. I think that's a waste of people's time. If I think that we have something tangible and useful to talk about, then yes, I would be up for it.
Yeah. Well, so for the audience, you taught a class at WorkbenchCon on short form content. I was sitting in the back of the, I was partially sitting and partially standing in the back of the room because the room was packed. There was no room to sit. So it was a standing room only. So kudos to you for doing that. It was also a smaller room, which didn't help, but there was a lot of interest in the short form content space, because I think of, everything happening now. That was before the Reels bonus had stopped. And so unfortunately, but YouTube shorts are still a thing, and it's going strong. I don't think that's dying anytime soon.
Yeah, and one of the things that I talked about there is short format is never going to be, your way to riches. And you're going to have to find a way to either leverage your short format content towards a product or service, or you're going to have to find a way to, develop long format content, which has always been the gold standard for, a revenue stream. So that's pretty much still true today. It's not like the Reels bonus was anything substantial for most folks anyway. Right. But the fact that they took it away really, I think it changed the way I viewed the platform. Because ultimately, this is a platform, on Instagram. It's a platform that garners quite a bit of attention, from the world's population, right? And that attention, the session time that they get, is worth a tangible value, monetary and advertising value that they get due to the fact that there are people that create the content that is engaging, interesting, and captivating.
Right.
And for them to not have anything in return, and for the platform to not systematically incentivize that, is absurd.
Right.
Beyond that, let's just take that, forget about that, right? Beyond that, what's even more absurd is the fact that they don't have a strong content copyright platform, and they don't make it easy for a person, a creator, reclaiming the rights to their content.
Correct. Yep.
It is such a convoluted and difficult process, and I know that... So I was told by a much, much, much larger channel that the Meta does have a way to do, I think it's called rights management or something to that extent. And so you can sign up for it. If they deem you worthy, they will let you have Meta rights management platform that you can use to more easily identify and report the content that is stolen from you and repost it. But why should you have to go through that? Why should you have to go through the verification process of, Meta determining that you're a worthy enough creator to do that? I think they should automatically make it easy. If you're the person who posted that piece of content first, before anyone else, anybody else that posts that piece of content should have their account, punished in some way.
Right.
But no, the Meta platform only cares about eyeballs and session time. They don't care where that content comes from. They don't care if that content is copied. They don't care about the creator. And they certainly don't care about the creator enough to compensate them for the money that it is generating for them. So all of that being said, I love Instagram for how interactive the platform is with the followers, as well as just kind of being able to private message folks and all of that. So it's a very interactive, engaging platform to keep in touch with all of those people.
Right.
Beyond that, as far as the actual platform goes, I really don't like it. I think Meta could do a lot better and should do a lot better.
Yeah, I think if YouTube were to implement an ability for people to do stories like Instagram has, you would see a huge shift away from Instagram and TikTok, because my personal opinion, like I would rather put my eyeballs on YouTube just because it's more educational and less about, the random thing trying to go viral.
Yeah.
It's, for me, and then I'm finding a lot of YouTube creators doing mostly stories on Instagram. And that's where you go to catch up on their day to day. And then you go over to the YouTube platform to actually watch the final product.
Mm-hmm. You see the drafts on Instagram, and then you see the finished product in the published piece on YouTube. Yeah. But I hate to break your heart, but YouTube does have a story platform. You just have to have 10,000 subscribers or more to do it.
Oh. Weird flex. Yeah. Well, but how do you watch that? I mean, that's not something that is just readily available for people to watch, right?
Yeah, it predominantly shows up on, I believe it's mostly mobile platform facing. And so YouTube will show you the red ring or some kind of ring around it, and you can see it. And no, personally, though, I think the fact that they have it is great, but it's certainly not something that the platform pushes out.
Right.
or encourages. So therefore, most folks, they'll do a story here or there, but it's not one of those things that actually, the type of content people engage with. So ultimately, it's kind of a moot point, but it is available. And I almost wonder if they're just collecting data at this point, right?
Right.
And then find a better way to implement it, because that's the nature of how Google does their business. They collect a ton of data, and then they find the most efficient way to implement, a change.
Yeah. I mean, the way that Instagram does it is it's nice to be able to just scroll through stories. Whereas I think what you're describing is you would have to kind of come across that creator and see that they've got a story out there. Is that right?
So if you click, I could be wrong because I don't really watch a lot of stories on YouTube as a platform, but I believe if you go into the subscription button or the button of where you're subscribed to folks, you should be able to see all of the folks up top that has
it's
stories.
It's there. You're right. Yeah. You win. I just don't ever look there. So maybe now I will.
It doesn't get the prominence that it deserves, I think, but also because it doesn't get the views, people don't post. And I think the posts linger for longer than 24 hours. I think it's 48 hours possibly, if I'm correct. And so I think that just goes to show that it's not a frequently enough posted thing where even YouTube is like, okay, we're going to hold on to that for a little longer just to see if other people will watch it. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, even as I'm scrolling here in the top, I'm seeing even the podcast logo there. So I could go and click on that, but so it's not separating it out by who has a story and who doesn't have a story, but it does have put that ring around it, like you said.
I see.
So okay, yeah, but yeah, it'd be I don't know, maybe not worth it. Maybe I'm the 1 in 1 million that would actually look at it. Of course, we've already established I'm the guy that watches the video to the end, so I'm obviously not too smart.
What's interesting though is my curiosity is, why hasn't YouTube implemented, the engaging interactive nature of the likes of Instagram in their platform? And I suspect it's because they want to distinguish themselves from that platform. I think they really I don't think they want an environment that's that interactive with the creator. I think they really wanted it to be the creator produces the content, puts it out there, and it's a data bank of information. It's not fast fashion, right? A lot of the information that you see on YouTube are really slow burner, evergreen content for the most part. And so in that sense, if you have this, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah. I do think that it is a conscious decision. And I have to imagine that it is one. Imagine a YouTube creator now having the ability to DM them, right?
Right, yeah.
I personally would think that's interesting, but that's because I'm primarily coming from Instagram as a platform and I'm used to that and I enjoyed that. But I think the legacy YouTube creators that had no interest in Instagram, they would be pretty upset if that was a possibility.
I mean, if you scroll through anybody who has a substantial amount of followers, they're not replying to every comment. So I can only imagine the amount of DMs that they would be getting. So, and also to your point, great point, not a bad strategy to try to separate yourselves from Instagram or Facebook or whatever. I mean, they are unique. And I think nobody's really super excited about the way Instagram and Facebook have been going lately.
Right. And, I see Instagram as a platform in the likeness of MySpace, in the sense that I think it has a life cycle. And all they're doing right now by implementing some of the recent changes is accelerating that life cycle, in my opinion.
Yeah.
YouTube has been one of the more original, public broadcasting platform, for video content. And it continues to be so, and it continues to dominate. Now, granted, they have the backing of Google, and that helps.
Right. Yeah, it definitely helps.
But it's one of those things that, it's so integral for a platform of learning. It's so integral as a platform of information, and they make it so easy to integrate those content into, HTML format in another website or something to that nature. So they are a established, seasoned legacy, platform. They don't need to go into fast fashion and burn out like MySpace.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't see on Instagram or Facebook, you don't see a post from more than a few weeks ago. Correct. So it's always just, that's the freeway version of the content. So you talked about your earlier influencers when you were getting into woodworking and making and stuff. Who are some of the biggest influencers, not necessarily by numbers, but who are the people that are influencing your work today?
In terms of my woodworking content? Oh, that's a tough one. I'm more interested in the strategy and content production side of things, like scripting, strategy, how to build a better script, how to build a better story, and how to make a better piece of content in that regard. No shade to some of the, more established woodworking channels, but for the most part, they have done... I mean, Steve Ramsey has innovated himself quite a bit, but most of the other folks have kind of stayed true to themselves, which it makes sense. I mean, that's what they're used to.
Right.
But newer folks come in and they're doing really well, right? In the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of new content creators pop up and they're doing exceptionally well. And that's because they understand the current game and they understand what it takes to produce content in the current environment and how to make them the most engaging and work favorably in the way the algorithm currently works. Yeah. So that is inspirational to me. And it's not necessarily any specific individual. It's, if somebody's consistently putting out really good content, as in by the numbers, I want to learn more about that. Why is that the case? And what are they doing? And what specific strategies can I, pick out by watching their content? And, and in some regards, just ask them, hey, I see that you're making this video. So what is your thought on it? And, it's one of those things like, I don't know, maybe back in the day, people wouldn't, reach back to me. But generally speaking, I'm in a place where most folks would reach back and they would engage in a conversation with me now. And so it's really wonderful to be able to do that and to get their insights and their thoughts. So I can just ask, which is nice. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And you, speaking of kind of reaching out to people or people reaching out to you, John Katz-Moses, you recently did that kind of collaboration with him and, just being able to go out there and sharpen, have him make you work all weekend.
Oh man, that was, our scheduling had to line up perfectly for that to work out. I had some commitments. He had commitments before and after. And so the only time I could have gone in was exactly during those days. And that's the only time that would have worked for him. I mean, without going into some of the personal stuff that needed to go in place for all of that to happen, he also had to have some of his staff available and come in and help film the thing on a weekend, which my understanding is they usually don't do that. So yeah, I mean, getting there was a lot more than I expected because I'm in New York and he's in Santa Barbara, California. Santa Barbara is a lot harder to get to than LAX for some reason, and it's like you're hopping on a lot more different flights to get there. But all in all, I'm really glad that we got a chance to do that because it's one of those things that, you know, a lot of folks have seen not a lot. Few folks have seen the background of my shop. A lot more folks have seen the background in his shop. And it's always fascinating to see it in real life. It's always underwhelming, mind you. Like in real life, it is always
way
a letdown.
Smaller than it looks.
Yeah. If you came to my shop and you saw it, you'd be like, this is where it all happens? You know, it's usually a letdown. But, you know, what you don't see is his, you know, immense production and warehouse and supply chain logistics capacity that he has there. And so,
yeah, I can imagine with all the stuff he's putting
with
out,
the store.
all these,
And so seeing all the folks that work there to make all of that happen is, I have no aspirations, you know, for that type of a business model, but it's a wonderful thing to be able to see and to see how it actually works and how it runs. So that was a great experience for sure.
The big question is did you get checked at security when you were bringing all your stones through to?
No. So the stones, he bought them himself.
Oh, okay. You didn't bring any with you?
No. So basically, we just bought, you know, we had our sets and we kind of talked about like, okay, I'm going to work on a video and these are the stones that I have. And we just kind of make sure that ours matched. So we just bought them. Yeah, I mean, and he's always had, I think, Shaptons. I think the 30K we both bought for the purpose of this video, which is a tremendous waste of money, by the way. And it's like $400 for a sharpening stone. Like, get out of here. That could buy the whole
crazy.
set.
Just buy a new set. Yeah. That's typically what I do.
So he bought that, and I think he bought a couple of other things, and he also bought a bunch of plain irons. What you don't see is how many hand tools he actually has.
Really?
The dude is very well stocked. And it's because he loves hand tools. And so he's got like a cabinet full of them. And so we just pulled out a whole bunch of iron from those and used them. And that's how it went down.
Can you take a cheap chisel, like a Harbor Freight chisel? Can you take a cheap chisel or a hand plane blade and make it good based off of that method?
If you're a blacksmith, yeah, probably. Because you're going to have to do
just
some
make
heat
a new one, melt it down and start over.
Look, if I asked you to take a piece of Gouda cheese and sharpen that into a really good chisel plane or chisel, you know, could you? Technically, you can probably get even Gouda to be reasonably sharp. Is it going to hold up? No.
I'll be looking for that video.
So, I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's a good way to demonstrate the point. That is, if the iron is soft, it's soft. It's going to bend more and it's more malleable, right? And so it's not going to hold edge as well. And so you can't take a cheap plain iron or a chisel and sharpen it really, really, really well and expect it to perform. It'll perform for a very brief period of time, and then it'll just get dull. And you're just going to be constantly trying to keep it sharp and all of that. You have similar problems with higher end tools, you know, with tooling steel, but they hold the edge much, much longer. And one of the things that's always fascinating when it comes to doing these tests is, holy crap, these modern steel are really, really good. And so in order for me to show measurable degradation, I have to work my butt off. Like, what people don't see is the days of hand planing and chiseling that it takes, and my arms are absolutely wasted and sore. So it takes a lot to show degradation in those tooling steel for sure.
So what takes more work, doing the chiseling video or doing the parallel clamp video?
So it's the parallel clamp video. I recognize the gravity. Look, very few people care about chisels. A lot more people care about parallel clamps. And I want to make sure that the nature of the content and how I choose to go about the testing and how applicable it actually is for an average woodworker it all makes sense and it all feels reasonably comprehensive. And doing a test like that on something like this is surprisingly challenging. I'm done with most of the tests. There's one last one that I have left. But one of the things that I also have to remember is there's my hands get fatigued quite a bit. Because it's not just one measurement. I have to do repeat measurements to get to the same points. And so I started to develop calluses in my hands from this video testing.
Wow.
It's a lot. And there are some parts of the test I'm doing it by feel. And if I'm doing it by feel, I need to have a refreshed hand.
Right.
And people don't realize that, or you wouldn't think about it, but I do have to give myself a break to come back and do that test again, so that, the fatigue doesn't play a role as a confounding factor in my test. So that's a great way for me to say I've been really lazy.
Well, I was wondering, like, if you're doing this, because a lot of that is by hand. When a general woodworker is going out there, they're going, "Yep, that's good enough. That's not going anywhere." The Boy Scout saying that's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so you're twisting it, and most people put too much pressure down on the clamp that they don't need to and stuff. But I was wondering if you were going to do it like to where it's a certain amount of repetitions based on the thread count, of the screw, or and it's hard to gauge, what if I'm twisting a clamp, I don't know if I'm putting 200 pounds of pressure.
Yeah. And that's the whole point, right? So people who are using these parallel clamps, they don't know how much force they're applying and if it's appropriate or not. And what I will say, though, when I was doing just the by feel test, like, this is how much I would clamp if I was clamping, and I did it blindfolded, so I don't know which clamp I'm using. And all of my clamping pressure is within 10% margin of each other. So you can hit pretty reasonable level of consistency by feel, surprisingly. Now, that happens to be too high of a pressure. But
you're saying you're too strong?
No. So
these muscles.
So without going too much into what the video is going to be about, but there is a segment where I literally just crunched human mechanics research publications to better understand how much rotational force the human wrist can apply. And there was this one study that did a really good job of it, I thought. And in there, they said the average human can apply on their wrist about 85 inch-pounds on typically. There's some variations between men and women, but not by much. And so I was like, okay, cool. Can I generate that?
Yeah.
So there is a part in the video where I literally say
86.
So I go out there and I legitimately test to see if I'm average or not, because I am the standard in the feel category, right? So I have to demonstrate that I am average. Turns out your boy can do a little bit more than average.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Got the sound effects ready to go. Locked and loaded. So what are some of you've got that video, and you started working on kind of another video in tandem.
Yeah. I actually have 4 videos in tandem right now in terms of material and sourcing. So it's tough because I'm in the space of testing things, and it requires me to create jigs or have a creative way to utilize an existing thing and have it do something else. So there's a lot of time that is spent on trying to come up with how can I test that, and is that a good way to test something?
Yeah.
And then what do I need to do that? And one of this video I have is one of the, with table saw blades, everybody talks about what a good table saw blade is, what it should have, et cetera, and they talk about how it cuts cleaner, it cuts more efficient. And I'm like, okay, can we throw a number at that? Can we objectively measure the efficiency of different types of table saw blades and, higher end brands versus, lower tier brands? And what would that look like? And turns out, I spent some time thinking about it, and there is a way that I think would make good sense. But the testing equipment is crazy expensive. And so I reached out to some of the brands that have those products. And so I'm trying to get their buy-in to give me the products so that I can actually make that video. Now, I justify, this as they're supplying the testing equipment, not the actual product that is being tested. Therefore, I'm still buying the product like the table saw blades. I think that's fair and okay. So that's a video idea in the pipeline. Obviously, I'm working on the respiratory, exposure to different types of woodworking stuff like particulates and VOCs and all that stuff. I'm very excited about that one.
I think that one's going to do well because I get a lot of questions on the laser about the exhaust and things like that. And, does it fill up your shop with smoke, and how are you protecting your lungs and things like that? And you don't see a lot of people when they're working at the laser wearing a mask. And so it'd be interesting to see that video.
It's even worse than that. You don't see people wearing a mask when they're working with epoxy. Epoxy is an exothermic reaction that releases volatile organic compounds. It just does. Yeah. And so how do I show that the level of the exposure to another woodworking thing, like working with a spray finish or something like that? So I'm still trying to tweak out the methodology of it. But at the end of the day, I think I'm going to recommend that it's best practice to obviously wear, different types of masks appropriate for that scenario, and how effective are they? And I want to show that. And most people will just measure their ambient environment, and they will say, okay, well, I sprayed this much finish in here, and this is how much I'm counting on volatile organic compounds. And I think that's a missed opportunity because our human lungs, we don't take in all of that stuff, right? And so I wanted to create an artificial lung chamber to actually measure and sample from inside that chamber. So it's like a more realistic number. And then I can do volumetric calculations and actually measure how many particulates you're being exposed to per unit of time and all of that. Now, in theory, I could legitimately probably do that experiment better and do a publication on it. Like scientific publication.
Right.
But
which is your background is in that space,
but obviously I'm not going to go that crazy because the YouTube audience doesn't care. But I need to find a easy quick way to demonstrate those concepts that's easily digestible. So that's one of the challenges that I have with that video. But I think I'm really excited for that video. I think I have to put in some disclosures. Because I am in the respiratory illness profession. So I have to delineate that my advice is not medical, all of that good stuff.
Right. I was thinking, is it going to be in size 4 font at the bottom of the screen?
It'll be like Star Wars themed, but just like the last
part. Or read really fast.
I also thought about getting a pulmonologist to do a small segment.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I mean, I have a pulmonologist friend. I don't know if that they would be interested in going in front of a camera. And if they are, and if they're willing to risk their careers. But I think the statement that I want him to make is that, PM 2.5 is bad for you. That's it. And then I'm like, and you don't need a doctor to tell you that. Google can tell you that.
Well, they could always be they used to do those old documentaries where the person is blacked out or the silhouette of them or whatever.
I always found it really fascinating that a lot of the TV, like a news show or whatever, they tend to do in more classic media. And if they're talking about a topic, they get an expert to do, a segment of that talk. And it's the most well-renowned person in that space, usually. Oh, we're talking about, brain surgery. Let's pick somebody from Hopkins who does brain surgery and is one of the best brain surgeons in the freaking planet. I'm like, the level of information you're conveying to a general audience, you don't need somebody of that high caliber to tell you that basic information, but they do it anyway.
It's eight out of 10 dentists recommend using a toothbrush. You're like, who are the other two?
I mean, they're talking about brain surgery is a very complicated procedure. No it is. Like, you don't need them to tell you that. So I always found that idea funny. So I kind of wanted to play off of that if he's willing to be on camera for it. So we'll see.
Yeah. Nice. So what's the future of your channel? Like you've got all these videos in the hopper. Obviously it's driving somewhere. You and I have talked extensively kind of about this, but just for the audience, like what is first of all, what's your tagline? Because I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah. I mean, it took me a while to figure out what I want my YouTube channel to be. And what my elevator speech is. This is one of the concepts that I think John from Lincoln Street Woodworks has consistently tried to hammer into my brain. And that is, you need to have a niche within woodworking and YouTube, and you need to have it something that's easily recognizable by people. And so if somebody in an elevator asks you, oh, what kind of YouTube woodworking channel do you have? You should be able to say exactly what kind of YouTube woodworking channel you have. All of the biggest YouTube woodworking channels that we know of, we can tell you and summarize exactly what they're about in one sentence. There's a reason for that. And so for the longest, I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll do builds when I started out. That'll be cool. It's not cool. And then I thought, okay, well, I like jigs and like coming up with a creative way to make jigs for things to solve a woodworking problem. Nothing wrong with that. And it's fine, but I just didn't feel like it was as much me. And I would try to extend myself into a jig that I normally wouldn't use or make in some regards. So I thought that was kind of a failed point. And so it took me a while. So I think my YouTube woodworking channel, the banner used to be just blank. And then it was woodworking jigs and fixtures. And more recently, I changed it to woodworking period tested period. And so I want to be known as the guy who does woodworking testing. Like anything in woodworking that you can test, anything you may think cannot be tested, I will test it.
Yeah.
Folks talk about so many things colloquially in woodworking by their affects, like how they feel about something and what the common wisdom is. This is not the after show, huh?
No.
Your common wisdom. I want numbers and I want objective data. And that's the driving force. And it satisfies an innate curiosity for me to kind of solidify all the BS chatter. Because nowadays you see on YouTube and woodworking, a lot of talking head people. A lot of people talking about what they think is relevant and important. And because they have flashy lights and fancy microphones, they seem very important and you know what they're talking about. And generally speaking, some people do, some people don't. And I think it's good to cut through that noise a little bit and just kind of provide objective numbers to think about. And I'm not trying to drive a conclusion. I'm trying to just provide the information. And so we'll see where that goes, but that's the plan.
Well, I will give you public credit here because you and I have talked about my channel quite a bit. And
you're the laser guy?
So you and I have talked about my channel quite a bit. I did a video. I sent it over to you, and you said, "Where's the data? Where's the why? Why would I watch this channel? Why would I watch this video?" And the conclusion was reshoot the entire thing, which I did.
Now, to be fair, I didn't say you need to redo the whole thing. I said, this is not the way I would approach it. This is the structure that I would approach it as. And you interpreted that as, I need to redo the whole thing, which was a good call.
Yeah. Well, definitely good call because I think today it crossed over 68,000 or 69,000.
Oh, shoot. Nice.
Which is obviously much better than the 1,000 or 1,500 that I was getting previously. So kudos to you and huge thank you to you. So I just want to say that publicly.
Well, I appreciate that.
But appreciate your advice.
I appreciate that, man. Thanks. But I genuinely have to say, at the end of the day, you're doing the work. And anything we talked about this at nauseum about this is just my thought, and who gives a shit what my thoughts are and what it means. You have to determine for yourself if that's relevant or if it's something that is, worth exploring for you. And that really, I wish more people said that in our space, because there are some creators in our space that I think have found some success, and from their success, they think they have it figured out.
Right.
And I don't know. I feel like it's great. Like in their scenario that worked out well, but I don't know that that's necessarily gospel. Like the advice that I would have given, that I gave for WorkbenchCon for short format content, from what I'm seeing now, that's absolutely useless advice for the most part, at least on Instagram. And so things change so often. And if I had to redo my Instagram channel again and grow it to where it is, I don't know that I would be successful, to be honest. And so I got lucky. I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and it worked out. I don't know what that success looks like in the future. And so, like, you can always try to infer things and try to do the best that you can. But for anybody that claims like, oh yeah, I know what you need to do, I think generally, I think they're a little bit full of shit. And so, my advice to you and what we talked about, it's really all coming down from, hey, you could present this information better. You could make this more concise. You could think a little bit more about what your target audience is like and what kind of information may be important to them. That's just good stuff. Like, you should just do that, period. And how you go about it and what you cover is entirely up to you,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad it worked out, but you're taking all of the credit, as you should. I mean, you should take all the credit because you've put in all the work.
Well, I think, essentially my point in that is it's good to have people to bounce ideas off of. I realized as I was doing it that I was probably relying on you too much. I was sending you more texts and messages probably than I should have, because I was really just trying to figure it out. But it is good to have a couple people you can bounce ideas off of. You were one of them, and Drew was one of them, and there was a couple other folks that I was messaging just to try to figure out, and they would ask objective questions. And so I think it's good for people to have somebody who's going to provide a no BS answer. Like you've got you and Scott and John, you guys kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and there's other different pockets of people who do that same thing, and those are the people I find that end up being successful. It's the people who are the lone rangers that they may have one or two videos, pop off and then and then it dies out and then that's it.
It's so interesting because I know early on when Scott, John, and I met, we looked at the three of us, and I think I mentioned we're going to be successful at some point because all of us find a way, like we have the drive, we have the passion, and we want to find success. And honestly, if you come up with, if you're flexible enough to reinvent yourself, learn new things and implement new things, and you stick with it, in the long run, you're going to succeed at just about anything in the world. So the same thing kind of applies here. And one of the things that we talked about is, we kind of took it from Mr. Beast, what he mentioned in an interview at a random point in time was, of course, I want to collaborate with other people and talk to other people because by talking to them, I can grow much faster. And the reason for it is all of the things that they learned as a lesson that took them maybe months, weeks, years, whatever, they can tell you to avoid that in a matter of minutes. You don't have to learn those lessons again if you are receptive and perceptive enough to understand what they're trying to convey to you. And so this is truly the case of, three heads are better than one. And so butting heads does help accelerate growth and understanding of how to make better content. So yeah, definitely a good idea to have people to bounce off of ideas from and have people who will give you an objective view. But it could be a biased view too. So always keep that in mind. Like if you listen to everything that I say, your content is going to be more like my content probably. Right. Yeah. And so you don't want to do that. I think you need to maintain some level of what is uniquely yours. But if you're saying it in a way and going about it in a way that's just straight up like against the core principles of what a good content should be, then people should, you should go to people that will tell you like, no, that's probably not the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's good. All good advice. I want to carry it over to the after show and talk to you a little bit more. So if you are interested in, well, first of all, Suman's contact information will be in the show notes, so make sure you check that out. But if you want to be part of that after show and hear what he has to say without all of the beeps, we'll just go ahead and let it air over there. Head over to patreon.com/MakerLoungePodcast and sign up to be a Patreon member on any level, starting at $3 a month. And so thank you to our patron members. I want to give a shout out to our top tier patron members. We've got Jimmy McAnally, Archiana Sirio, Wim Design, Calvary Customs LLC, Clean Cut Woodworking, Bailey Thompson, Dave Garcia, Broken Lead Woodworks, Starks Lagoon, Sawyer Design, Kadama Design, Dylan Furniture, and Shock the Fox. So thank you to those patron members and all of our patron members. And also thank you to Surf Prep for sponsoring today's episode. Suman, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
We'll head over to that after show.
Sounds like a blast.